and joyous in 1 Nephi 8:12 and 11:23. Another noteworthy fact is that the tree of life, which recalls the Asherah, this appears in Israelite tradition as a metaphorical expression for wisdom. Mark Smith sees Proverbs 3:13 through 18 as a conspicuous chiasm, in which the essentially equivalent inside terms are chokhmah, wisdom, and etz hayim, a tree of life. The apocryphal book of Ecclesiasticus, which is also known as the Wisdom of Ben Sira, uses various trees to symbolize wisdom. Wisdom is rooted in the fear of the Lord, says Ecclesiasticus 1:20, and long life grows on her branches. She is a tree of life to them that lay hold upon her, and happy is everyone that retaineth her. Similar imagery can be found elsewhere in the Bible as well, including passages where wisdom is the explicit or implicit topic of discussion. And then he quotes several chapters. Well, very interesting how it ties in with the happiness, the joy, the tree of life, laying hold upon her, etc., with the mother in Nephi's vision, with the ancient wisdom tradition, isn't it? On page 213, several parallels between the language of Proverbs 1 through 9 and the language of the visions in 1 Nephi will be apparent to careful readers. Note, for example, Proverbs 3:18, the image of taking hold. Well, this is the iron rod idea of Lehi and Nephi's vision. Of course, take hold of the iron rod. And the New English Bible version of Proverbs 3:18 speaks of grasping her and holding her fast, in very much the same way that Lehi and Nephi's visions speak of catching hold of and holding fast to the iron rod. Isn't that remarkable? Proverbs 4:13 advises us to take fast hold of instruction. Let her not go. Keep her, for she is thy life. Baruch 4:1 declares that all who hold fast to wisdom shall live, but those who forsake her shall die. Now see, remember, this is Isaiah. This is Margaret Barker's analysis of Isaiah's declaring woe to the people. Hezekiah took out the Asherah. He took out the wisdom, the mother goddess, from the temple, and they were destroyed by the Assyrians and then once again by the Babylonians, you see. Very interesting. This wisdom idea is not lost on the Book of Mormon in their visions of the Tree of Life, in other words, and it connects very well with them emphasizing Isaiah as the prophet. Very interesting here. That's my comments, not Peterson's. Well, let me see. Still on page 213. Remember, remember, my son, says Alma, who echoes the theme in Ecclesiastes, learn wisdom in thy youth. Yea, learn in thy youth to keep the commandments of God. Well, both Proverbs and 1 Nephi speak constantly in the imagery of ways and paths and walking, and they warn against going astray or wandering off or wandering in strange roads. Proverbs 3:17 declares that wisdom's ways are ways of pleasantness, and all her paths are peace. We need a little wisdom in our government these days, don't we? We are too much of a warmongering nation right now. I'm not going to get into that, but war is not the key. Why do you think the Book of Mormon is chock full of all these vicious, nasty wars between the people? Mormon saw our day, and he said, "Oh, be wiser than we have been." War destroys. Well, that's enough of that noise. I'm not going to get into politics here. But anyway, wisdom's paths are paths of peace. In subsequent Nephite tradition, King Benjamin speaks of the Spirit of the Lord that guides in wisdom's paths. Mosiah 2:36. And Mormon laments how slow people are to walk in wisdom's paths. Helaman 12:5. Well, Proverbs has wisdom describing her words as plain, an attribute that is lauded repeatedly throughout 1 Nephi, notably in the narrative of Nephi's vision, and throughout 2 Nephi. He loves to speak in words of plainness, he says. This phrase, plain and precious, which is recurrent in Nephi's account of his experience with the angelic guide, could serve as an excellent description of biblical wisdom, surpassed in its aptness only by the phrasing plain and pure and most precious in 1 Nephi 14:23. In Proverbs 8:19, wisdom declares, "My fruit is better than gold, yea, than fine gold. She is more precious than rubies," says Proverbs 3:15, "and all the things thou canst desire are not to be compared unto her." Wisdom, declares Ecclesiasticus 4:11, raises her sons to greatness. Similarly, Lehi and Nephi's tree was precious above all. 1 Nephi 11:9, a tree whose fruit was desirable to make one happy, desirable above all other fruit. Accordingly, no price is too high to pay if it will bring us to attain wisdom. "I say unto you," Alma the Younger remarked to the poor among the Zoramites in the context of a discussion on the seed and centering on the tree of life that could be nourished out of it, "It is well that you're cast out of your synagogues, that you may be humble, that you may learn wisdom." Alma 32:12. Isn't it remarkable how this same theme keeps recurring in the imagery in the Book of Mormon? True to his roots in ancient Israel. This is Peterson on page 215. True to his roots in ancient Israel, Lehi taught that it must needs be that there is an opposition, even the forbidden fruit in opposition to the tree of life, the one being sweet and the other bitter. 2 Nephi 2:15. The 4th century Coptic Manichaean psalm book contrasts the king of light, who is the tree of life, to the darkness, which is the tree of death. This doctrine of divinely ordained opposites is well documented in wisdom literature. It's also in our Book of Mormon. Isn't this interesting? Not only the number 7, but the idea of opposition, the idea of being happy, the idea of the tree of life, the idea of proclaiming paths of peace, not war. All of this is intimately involved in the Book of Mormon record, and it is intimately involved with the ancient wisdom tradition, as Margaret Barker has also elaborated. And now Daniel Peterson, and David Bokovoy, and John Voetness, and now you can say Carrie Schertz. Well, furthermore, for all her exalted status, wisdom must face scorners. And of course, we immediately think of 1 Nephi, of those in the large and spacious building in his vision of the tree of life, who point the finger of scorn at the saints coming toward to partake of the tree of life. This building is an alternative representation of a human alternative to the true wisdom, the divine wisdom of God. Nephi says this great and spacious building represents the world and its wisdom. On page 217, Peterson notes, in 1 Nephi 8:13-14, Lehi's tree is associated with a river and a spring of water. And my gosh, I elaborated for pages from Margaret Barker's Great High Priest on just this symbolism. The symbols of fountain and tree of life are frequent in wisdom literature too. Nephi himself in 1 Nephi 11:25 actually equates the tree of life with the fountain of living waters. And these waters, he says, are a representation of the love of God. And I also beheld, he continues, that the tree of life was a representation of the love of God. Truly, there can be no greater illustration of God's care for his children than this. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have everlasting life. Well, the inclusion in 1 Nephi of an authentically pre-exilic religious symbol that could scarcely have been deduced by the New York farm boy Joseph Smith from the Bible, especially given his severely limited knowledge of that book in the late 1820s when he was translating the Golden Plates. Well, this obviously suggests that the Book of Mormon is indeed an ancient historical record, and that in turn suggests that God did indeed so love the world that he gave his only begotten Son to save us. The Book of Mormon is, as it claims to be, a second witness for Christ. So thank you for joining me in my Backyard Professor podcast series. I'll see you next time on the podcasts. Have a great life.